Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and watched the stars through the big window. Space looked the same as always, black with tiny white dots everywhere. But today felt different. His gut told him something was coming. "Captain, I'm getting weird readings on the scanner," said Dr. Lisa Grant from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life. Though they had never found any real aliens before, her fingers moved fast over the controls. "The energy patterns don't match anything in our database." Jake walked over to look at her screen. Strange waves of color moved across it like water. He had been in space for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like this. "Pete, what do you think?" Jake asked the ship's engineer. Pete Collins was fixing something under a control panel, but he crawled out when he heard his name. "Those readings are impossible, Captain," Pete said, wiping grease from his hands. "The energy levels are off the charts. Whatever is making this has technology way beyond ours." Amy Foster, the communications officer, suddenly sat up straight in her chair. "Captain, I'm picking up ships on long-range sensors, big ones. And they're coming this way fast." Jake felt his heart beat faster. First contact with aliens was something humans had dreamed about for hundreds of years. But now that it was happening, he felt scared and excited at the same time. "Red alert," Jake said. The bridge lights turned red and warning sounds filled the air. All hands to battle stations. The crew moved quickly to their positions. Jake had trained them well. They were good people, the best Earth had to offer. But they were about to face something completely unknown. "How long until they reach us?" Jake asked. 20 minutes, Captain," Amy replied. Her voice shook a little. "Can we run away?" Pete asked. Jake thought about it. The horizon was fast, but not fast enough to outrun ships with better technology. Besides, running away might make the aliens think humans were hostile or weak. "No," Jake said. "We stay and try to talk. That's why we're out here." Dr. Grant looked up from her scanner. "Captain, I'm reading 5 ships. They're huge. Each one is 10 times bigger than us. The design is like nothing I've ever seen, smooth and curved, almost like crystals." Jake nodded. He opened a channel to the whole ship. "This is the captain speaking. We are about to make first contact with an alien species. Stay calm, follow orders, and remember that we represent all of humanity today. Morrison out." The next 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. The crew watched their screens as 5 massive ships appeared in front of them. The alien vessels were beautiful and scary at the same time. They looked like giant crystals that caught and reflected light in amazing ways. "They're surrounding us," Amy said. "We can't move in any direction." "Are they pointing weapons at us?" Jake asked. "I can't tell," Pete replied. "Their technology is too advanced. They could have weapons we don't even know about." Jake took a deep breath. "Amy, open a channel on all frequencies." "Let's try to talk." "Channel open, Captain. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Horizon. We come in peace. Can you understand us?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Amy's screen lit up with signals. "Captain, they're responding." The signal is incredibly complex. It's like they're trying to learn our language in real time. Suddenly, a voice came through the speakers. It was strange, like music mixed with the sound of wind through trees. But somehow Jake could understand the words. "Human vessel. I am Kethvar, advisor to Her Imperial Majesty Empress Valeth of the Zephyrian Empire. You will prepare to receive the Empress for diplomatic contact." Jake looked at his crew. Dr. Grant was writing notes as fast as she could. Pete was checking all the ship's systems. Amy was recording everything. "We agree to meet," Jake said. "But our ship is small." "How many of your people are coming?" "The Empress travels with minimal escort. Prepare your main meeting room." The channel went quiet. Jake turned to his crew. "You heard them. Pete, make sure the meeting room has clean air and good lighting. Amy, keep recording everything. Lisa, get ready to take notes on everything you see. This is the most important day in human history." 30 minutes later, Jake stood in the meeting room with his senior officers. They had put on their best uniforms and tried to make the room look nice. It wasn't much compared to what the aliens probably had, but it was the best they could do. A bright light filled the room, and suddenly 3 figures appeared. Jake's mouth fell open. The aliens were tall, much taller than humans. Their skin was blue and seemed to glow from inside. Their hair moved like liquid metal, and their eyes were large and had many colors. The one in the middle was clearly the leader. She wore robes that seemed to be made of starlight, and a crown that looked like it was carved from a single crystal. "This had to be Empress Valeth. I am Empress Valeth," she said. Her voice was beautiful like a song. "You are the humans we have heard whispers about." Jake stepped forward. "I am Captain Jake Morrison. Welcome to our ship, Your Majesty." The Empress took a step toward him, and then something strange happened. She stopped walking and her head tilted up slightly. Her nostrils moved like she was smelling something. Jake watched as the Empress's eyes grew wide. Her whole body started to shake. The other aliens looked worried and started talking in their musical language. Then, to Jake's complete shock, tears began rolling down the Empress's face. But these weren't normal tears. They were like liquid crystal, catching the light and throwing rainbow colors around the room. "Impossible," the Empress whispered. "The scent, it cannot be." She turned and ran from the room. The bright light appeared again and all three aliens disappeared. Jake and his crew stood there in silence, not knowing what had just happened. Why had the most powerful alien leader they had ever met started crying after smelling him? Amy's communication station beeped. "A message was coming through, Captain," Amy said, her voice full of confusion. "They're sending coordinates to some kind of space station. The message says, the human called Jake Morrison must come alone." Jake looked at the coordinates on the screen. Whatever had just happened, it was only the beginning. "Set course for those coordinates," Jake said. "We're going to find out what this is all about." As the horizon turned toward the unknown, Jake wondered what secret his smell had revealed to an alien empress, and why it had made her cry tears that looked like diamonds. Jake Morrison stared at the space station growing larger on the main screen. Haven Station looked like someone had stuck together pieces from 100 different ships. Parts of it were smooth metal, other parts looked like crystal, and some sections seemed to be made of materials he couldn't even name. "I still think this is a bad idea, Captain," Dr. Lisa Grant said from her seat next to him in the shuttle. "Meeting an alien empress who ran away crying after smelling you? That doesn't sound safe." Danny Wright, their best pilot, was flying the shuttle toward the station's docking bay. "The dock's right, Captain. This feels like a trap." Jake understood their worry, but something deep inside told him he had to do this. The way the Empress had looked at him, the tears on her face, there was a mystery here that needed solving. "If I don't come back in 6 hours, return to the horizon and report to Earth Command," Jake said. "But I have a feeling this is important. Really important." The docking bay was huge. Ships of all shapes and sizes filled it. Some looked like metal insects, others were round like bubbles, and a few were just geometric shapes that hurt to look at. "Looks like this place gets visitors from everywhere," Danny said as he landed the shuttle. Jake checked his weapon one more time, even though he hoped he wouldn't need it. Dr. Grant carried her scanner and recording equipment. They both wore spacesuits just in case the station didn't have air humans could breathe. The airlock opened with a hiss. The air was good, though it smelled like metal and strange spices. Jake and Lisa stepped into a corridor filled with aliens of every type imaginable. A creature that looked like a walking tree pointed them toward the main area. Another alien, covered in fur and walking on 6 legs, sold them a translation device that would help them understand the different languages. The main area of Haven Station was like a giant marketplace. Aliens bought and sold things Jake couldn't even guess at. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows and bridges connected different levels. "Captain Morrison?" Jake turned around. Standing behind him was a tall alien he recognized, one of the Empress's guards from the ship. "I am Kethvar," the alien said. "We spoke before. The Empress is waiting for you, but first I must explain some things." Kethvar led them to a quiet area with tables and chairs made for different types of bodies. He sat across from Jake and Dr. Grant, his blue skin glowing softly in the dim light. "What your people call smell is much more than you understand," Kethvar began. "For Zephyrians, scent carries information about emotions, health, even memories. We can smell fear, joy, love, courage." Dr. Grant leaned forward. "That's fascinating. Humans do release pheromones, but we can't detect them very well. When the Empress smelled you, Captain Morrison, she detected something impossible, a scent signature that should not exist." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Kethvar was quiet for a moment, like he was deciding how much to tell them. 1,000 years ago, my people were not warriors. We were scholars, artists, builders of beautiful things. We lived on peaceful worlds and studied the stars. "What changed?" Jake asked. "The Devourers came." Dr. Grant's scanner beeped as she recorded everything. "What are Devourers?" "Machines. Ancient machines that eat all life. They consumed entire star systems, turning living worlds into metal and circuits. Billions died. My people would have been extinct, but for the Guardians. Who were the Guardians? Jake asked. A species much like yours. 2 arms, 2 legs, warm blood. They had brown and yellow and black skin like humans. But most important, they had the same spirit. The same willingness to fight for others, even strangers. Jake felt a chill run down his back. What happened to them? They saved us. The Guardians had weapons and ships, but more than that, they had courage. When the Devourers came for Zephyrian worlds, the Guardians fought back. They taught us how to build weapons, how to fight, how to survive. Kethavar's voice became sad. But the Guardians paid the price. They fought the Devourers to the last ship, the last warrior. They all died so that my people could live. Dr. Grant looked up from her notes. And you think Captain Morrison smells like these Guardians? Not just similar, identical. The same pheromone signature that our ancestors knew. It should be impossible. The Guardians are extinct. Jake's mind raced. Maybe humans and Guardians evolved from the same source. Maybe we're related somehow. That is what the Empress hopes to discover. But there is more to the story, Captain Morrison. Something the Empress finds difficult to speak of. Before Jake could ask what he meant, another bright light appeared in front of them. Empress Valeth materialized, but she looked different than before. Her beautiful robes were simpler, and her crystal crown was gone. She looked tired and sad. Captain Morrison, she said, sitting down across from him, I apologize for my behavior on your ship. What you must think of me. I think you recognize something that meant a lot to you. Jake said carefully. I'd like to understand what. The Empress closed her large, colorful eyes. When I smell you, I smell my own genetic memories. Every Zephyrian carries the memories of our ancestors in our DNA. When something triggers those memories, we experience them as if they were our own. What memories? Dr. Grant asked. Of Guardian warriors standing over Zephyrian children, protecting them from machines that came to kill. Of Guardian pilots flying their ships into Devourer vessels to save refugee transports. Of the last Guardian bleeding and dying, using his final breath to teach my ancestor how to build a weapon that could hurt the machines. Tears began flowing down the Empress's face again. The crystal drops caught the station's lights and scattered rainbows across the table. Your scent, Captain Morrison, smells exactly like courage, like someone willing to die for strangers, like the Guardians who saved my people. Jake felt overwhelmed. Your Majesty, I'm honored that you see something good in humans, but I'm just one person. I can't speak for my whole species. But you can, the Empress said, because what I smell in you I have smelled in other humans. Your Dr. Grant carries the same signature of curiosity and care. Your pilot radiates the same protective instincts. You are what the Guardians were. She leaned forward. Captain Morrison, I must tell you something else. Something that shames me and my people. What is it? We survived because of the Guardian's sacrifice, but we did not honor it. The trauma of nearly dying, the fear of the Devourers returning, it changed us. We became what we swore we would never be. Jake waited for her to continue. We became conquerors. We told ourselves it was to protect others, to be ready for the Devourer's return. But we conquered peaceful worlds. We enslaved species that had done nothing wrong. We became the thing the Guardians died to stop. The Empress put her face in her hands. For 1,000 years I have ruled an empire built on the graves of the very people who saved us. When I smell you, I smell what we used to be, what we could have been. Jake looked at Dr. Grant, then back at the Empress. It's not too late to change. You think so? I know so. The fact that you feel bad about it means you're still the people the Guardians saved. You just lost your way. The Empress looked up at him with hope in her alien eyes. Would you help us find our way back? Before Jake could answer, alarms began ringing throughout the station. Aliens ran in every direction, shouting in languages the translation device couldn't keep up with. Kethavar stood up quickly. What is happening? A voice boomed through the station's speakers in the common trade language. All ships prepare for immediate departure. Long-range sensors have detected massive geometric objects approaching this sector. The Devourers have returned. The Empress went completely white. After 1,000 years. They're back. Jake stood up, feeling that familiar courage the Empress had smelled. Then I guess it's time to find out if humans really are like the Guardians. The Empress looked at him with something like worship in her eyes. You would fight them? For people you don't even know? Jake smiled. Your Majesty, that's what humans do. The journey back to the UES horizon felt longer than usual. Jake Morrison sat in the shuttle's passenger seat while Danny Wright flew them back to their ship. Dr. Lisa Grant was already working on her report about the meeting with Empress Valath. So, let me get this straight, Danny said, keeping his eyes on the controls.
These Zephyrians think we smell like some ancient alien heroes?
And now robot monsters are coming back to eat everyone. That's about right, Jake replied. He was still trying to process everything himself. The idea that humans might be connected to an extinct alien race seemed impossible, but the Empress's reaction had been too real to fake. When they reached the horizon, Jake called a meeting with his senior staff. Around the table sat Dr. Grant, Engineer Pete Collins, Communications Officer Amy Foster, Science Officer Ben Taylor, and Security Chief Kate Miller. I know this sounds crazy, Jake began, but I need everyone to understand what we're dealing with. He told them everything about the Guardians, the Devourers, and the Empress's emotional reaction to his scent. The crew listened in silence, their faces showing a mix of wonder and worry. "Captain," said Ben Taylor, "are we really talking about going to war against machine aliens? Our ship isn't built for that kind of fight." "We might not have a choice," Jake replied. "If these Devourers are as dangerous as the Empress says, they won't stop with the Zephyrians. They'll keep coming until they've consumed everything." Kate Miller, the security chief, leaned forward. "What kind of weapons are we talking about? Can our systems even hurt these things?" "I don't know yet," Jake admitted. "But the Empress wants to meet with me again. She says she has something important to show me." Dr. Grant looked up from her notes. "The biological implications are fascinating. If humans really do produce the same pheromones as these Guardians, it suggests either we're related or there's something universal about courage-based biochemistry." 2 days later, Jake found himself aboard the Empress's flagship. The Zephyrian ship was beautiful inside, with walls that seemed to be made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Everything was smooth and curved, like the inside of a giant seashell. Kethvar led Jake through corridors filled with Zephyrian crew members. They all stopped what they were doing to stare at him. Some looked curious, others seemed almost frightened. "They can all smell it," Kethvar explained. "The Guardian scent, for many of them, it's the first time they've experienced their genetic memories so strongly." They reached a large room at the center of the ship. The walls were covered with holographic displays showing images of aliens Jake didn't recognize. Some looked almost human, others were completely different. "Welcome to our memorial hall," Empress Valath said, appearing from behind one of the displays. She wore the same simple robes as before, but her eyes looked sadder than ever. "These are the Guardians?" Jake asked, walking up to look at the images. "Yes. This is all we have left of them. Pictures, recordings, DNA samples. They gave everything to save us, and we couldn't even save their culture." Jake studied the holographic faces. The Guardians did look remarkably human. 2 arms, 2 legs, faces that showed intelligence and kindness. But there were differences too. Their eyes were larger. Their skin had different colors, and some had markings that might have been natural or decorative. "They're beautiful," Jake said quietly. They were. "But Captain Morrison, I brought you here to tell you the complete truth about what my people became after the Guardians died." The Empress walked to another section of the room. Here, the displays showed star maps and battle recordings. After the Devourers were driven away, we told ourselves we had to be ready for their return. We built weapons. We built ships. We created an army. The images showed Zephyrian fleets growing larger and more powerful over the centuries. But armies need enemies to justify their existence. When the Devourers didn't return, we found other threats: pirates, aggressive species, any group that might pose a danger to Zephyrian worlds. Jake began to understand where this was going. At first, we only fought when attacked. But over time, we began to attack first, to prevent future threats. We conquered worlds to create buffer zones. We enslaved species to work our mines and factories. The displays now showed conquered planets, alien prisoners, massive industrial complexes built on the bones of dead civilizations. We told ourselves it was all necessary, that we were protecting the galaxy from chaos. But the truth is, we became the very thing the Guardians died to stop. We became conquerors. The Empress turned to face Jake, and her crystal tears began flowing again. "I have ruled for 300 years, Captain Morrison. In that time, my empire has conquered 47 star systems. We have enslaved 12 different species. We have turned countless worlds into factories to build more ships, more weapons. Jake felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Because when I smell you, I remember what my people used to be. Before the fear, before the trauma, before we let our pain turn us into monsters. She walked to the center of the room where a large holographic display showed the current Zephyrian Empire. It was massive, covering hundreds of star systems. Every world you see here was taken by force. Every species under our control was enslaved in the name of protection. We have spent 1,000 years becoming everything the Guardians would have hated. Jake looked at the scope of the Empire and felt overwhelmed. There has to be a way to fix this. Is there? How do you undo 1,000 years of conquest? How do you free worlds that no longer remember freedom? How do you ask forgiveness from species you've destroyed? You start, Jake said simply. You stop conquering and start freeing. You ask for help from people who still remember what the right thing looks like. The Empress stared at him. You would help us? Even knowing what we've done? Your Majesty, humans have made plenty of mistakes in our history. We've had wars, slavery, genocide, but we learned that the only way forward is to admit our mistakes and do better. But the Devourers are coming. If we release our conquered worlds now, we'll be weak when they arrive. Jake thought about this. Maybe. Or maybe all those species you've enslaved would fight beside you if they were free and you asked for their help instead of demanding it. The Empress looked shocked, like this possibility had never occurred to her. You think freed slaves would fight for their former masters? I think people will fight for a future they helped choose. But they won't fight for masters who force them. Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the ship. Kethver's voice came over the communication system. Your Majesty, urgent news from our deep space monitors. The Devourer fleet is larger than expected. Thousands of ships, each one the size of a moon. They're moving through the outer rim systems, consuming everything in their path. The Empress went pale. How long until they reach Zephyrian space? 6 months, Majesty. Maybe less. Jake felt his heart pounding. That's not much time to build an alliance. It's impossible, the Empress said. The species we've conquered hate us. They would rather see us destroyed than help us. Then we better start asking for forgiveness right now, Jake replied. And we better make it really convincing. The Empress looked at him with a mixture of hope and terror. You really think it could work? I think it's the only chance any of us have. The Guardians didn't save your people so you could become tyrants. They saved you so you could be better. And if we try and fail, if the Devourers destroy us while we're trying to free our slaves, Jake smiled even though he was scared too, then at least we'll die doing the right thing. That's what the Guardians would have wanted. The Empress closed her eyes and was quiet for a long moment. When she opened them again, Jake saw something new there, determination. Very well, Captain Morrison. We will try. But I will need human help to convince the other species to trust us. You'll have it, Jake promised. That's what humans do. We help people become better than they were. As the two of them stood in the memorial hall, surrounded by images of the long-dead Guardians, Jake wondered if he was making a promise he could keep. But looking at the Empress's hopeful face, he knew he had to try. The Guardians had saved the Zephyrians once. Now it was time for humans to help save them again, this time from themselves. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison promised to help Empress Valeth free her conquered worlds. Now, standing on the bridge of the UES horizon, he watched the most impossible sight of his life unfold on the main screen. The Kepler system, once home to a beautiful blue-green world called Thyros, was gone. In its place floated geometric metal structures the size of planets. Massive mechanical arms reached out from central hubs, breaking apart asteroids and moons, feeding raw materials into processing centers that glowed with hellish red light. My God, whispered Dr. Lisa Grant from her science station. They're turning the entire solar system into a machine. The Devourers had arrived 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Scout reports from the outer rim painted a picture of destruction beyond imagination. Entire star systems consumed, their matter converted into more Devourer ships and processing stations. Captain, said Communications Officer Amy Foster, we're getting reports from across the sector. The Devourers aren't just taking resources. They're harvesting biological material too. Every living thing they find gets processed into some kind of organic computer components. Jake felt sick. They're turning people into parts of their machines? It looks that way, sir. Engineer Pete Collins looked up from his station. Captain, I've been analyzing the Devourer technology with Ben Taylor. These aren't just machines. They're some kind of hybrid between organic and mechanical systems. That's why they need biological material. Dr. Grant's scanner beeped urgently. Captain, I'm detecting something important. The Devourer ships seem to coordinate through some kind of biological network. Individual units share information instantaneously across vast distances. Like a hive mind? Jake asked. Exactly. But it's not just electronic signals. There are chemical components too. Pheromones, maybe even DNA-based communication. Jake's mind raced. Are you saying they communicate through smell? Partly, yes. It's incredibly sophisticated. Much more complex than human or even Zephyrian scent-based communication. Before Jake could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Security Chief Kate Miller's voice came over the intercom. Captain, to the briefing room immediately. We've got incoming messages from multiple sources. Jake hurried to the briefing room, where his senior staff was already gathered around the communication array. Multiple holographic displays showed alien faces. Some he recognized from the Zephyrian Empire. Others were completely new. Report, Jake said. Amy Foster manipulated the controls. Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different Zephyrian-controlled worlds. The local governors are asking for immediate evacuation, but that's not the strangest part. She switched to another display showing a reptilian alien with scarred skin. This is General Vextar of the Saurian Republic. They were conquered by the Zephyrians 50 years ago. The reptilian's translated voice was harsh but clear. Human Captain Morrison, we have heard of your alliance with the Empress. The enemy approaches our world. We request permission to fight alongside the Zephyrian fleet. Jake was stunned. They want to fight with their former conquerors? It gets better, Amy continued, switching to another display. This one showed a graceful alien with flowing tentacles instead of arms. The Aquatic Collective, enslaved for 2 centuries, has offered their entire military fleet to the Alliance. More displays appeared, dozens of different species, all offering to join the fight against the Devourers. Each one had been conquered by the Zephyrians, but now they were volunteering to stand together against a greater threat. How is this possible? Jake asked. Ben Taylor pulled up a tactical display. The Empress kept her word, Captain. 3 weeks ago, she issued a formal proclamation freeing all conquered worlds and offering reparations. At first, most species didn't believe it was real. What changed their minds? Jake asked. The Devourers, Kate Miller replied grimly. Nothing brings enemies together like a bigger enemy. Dr. Grant leaned forward to study the species profiles. Captain, I've been analyzing biological data from all these different races. Each one produces unique pheromone signatures, but there are some interesting patterns. What kind of patterns? The species that are volunteering to fight all show chemical markers associated with courage, protectiveness, and what we might call pack loyalty. It's similar to what the Empress detected in you. Jake felt a strange chill. Are you saying all these species smell like the Guardians? Not exactly, but they all produce some of the same chemical compounds. It's like courage and the willingness to protect others creates similar biological responses across different evolutionary paths. Suddenly, a new holographic display appeared, Empress Valath calling from her flagship. Captain Morrison, she said, and Jake could see hope and fear warring in her alien features. The impossible is happening. Species that hated us for centuries are offering to fight beside us, but I fear it may not be enough. What do you mean? Our combined fleets number perhaps 3,000 ships. The Devourer force approaching our sector contains over 50,000 vessels, each one capable of destroying a planet. The room went quiet. Those odds were impossible. There has to be something we can do, Jake said. Some weakness we can exploit. Dr. Grant suddenly sat up straight. Captain, I think there might be. The biological communication network I detected. If we could disrupt it somehow, the individual Devourer units might lose coordination. How would we do that? The same way the Empress recognized you as guardian-like. Scent. Chemical signals. If we could produce a pheromone that interferes with their network, Pete Collins caught on immediately. Like jamming their radio signals, but with smell instead of electronics. Exactly. And I think I know what chemical we need. Dr. Grant pulled up her analysis of Jake's biological profile from the first meeting with the Empress, the pheromone signature that triggered the Empress's memories, the one that smells like courage and protection. It's incredibly complex, but we might be able to synthesize it. How much would we need? Jake asked. That's the problem. To disrupt a network spanning thousands of ships, we'd need massive amounts. And the only way to produce it naturally would be— She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Would be what, Doctor? Actual humans experiencing intense protective emotions. Fear for others, willingness to sacrifice, that kind of thing. The artificial version might not be strong enough. Jake understood immediately. You're talking about using humans as bait. More than that. We'd need volunteers to fly ships directly into the Devourer fleet, releasing concentrated pheromone clouds, while experiencing maximum emotional intensity. It would be incredibly dangerous. Kate Miller stepped forward. How dangerous? Dr. Grant looked at her sadly. The volunteers probably wouldn't survive. The ships would need to get close enough to the Devourer command vessels to flood their sensory networks. At that range, they'd be sitting ducks. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Danny Wright's voice came over the intercom. Captain? I couldn't help overhearing. If you need volunteers for a suicide mission, count me in. Danny, no. We haven't even— Captain, I've been thinking about what you said, about humans being like those Guardian folks. If they could sacrifice themselves for strangers, so can we. More voices joined in over the ship's communication system. Amy Foster, Pete Collins, even crew members Jake had barely spoken to. All volunteering for a mission they knew would probably kill them. Jake felt tears in his eyes. I can't ask you to do this. You're not asking, sir, Kate Miller said quietly. We're volunteering. It's what humans do. On the holographic display, Empress Valath was openly weeping her crystal tears. Captain Morrison, your species truly are the inheritors of the Guardians. But surely there must be another way. Jake looked around the room at his crew, his friends, all willing to die for people they'd never met. Dr. Grant was right about one thing. This level of courage and sacrifice would produce pheromones that no laboratory could duplicate. Maybe there is another way, Jake said slowly. What if we don't need to sacrifice ourselves? What if we just need to make the Devourers think we're going to? Dr. Grant frowned. What do you mean? The pheromones are triggered by genuine emotion, right? By real willingness to sacrifice for others? Yes, but then we feel that emotion, produce those chemicals, and then we run like hell. Kate Miller smiled grimly. A fake suicide mission that feels real enough to produce real pheromones? Exactly. We go in, flood their network with Guardian scent, disrupt their coordination, and then the Alliance fleet hits them while they're confused. On the display, Empress Valath leaned forward. Would such a plan work? Dr. Grant was already running calculations. It might. If we could get enough volunteers to approach multiple command vessels simultaneously, the pheromone release could cascade through their entire network. Jake nodded. Then that's what we'll do. Amy, send a message to the Alliance fleet. Tell them we have a plan, but we're going to need every ship they can spare. Yes, sir. As his crew prepared for the most dangerous mission in human history, Jake looked out at the stars and thought about the Guardians. Somewhere among those points of light, an entire species had given their lives to save strangers. Now, it was humanity's turn to stand in their place. The only question was whether they could pull off a miracle without becoming martyrs in the process. The Kepler Nebula had never seen so many different ships in one place. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and watched thousands of vessels from dozens of species form up into battle formation. Former enemies now flew side by side, united against the approaching Devourer fleet. Final count is in, Captain, reported Amy Foster from her communications station. We have 2,843 ships, everything from Zephyrian battlecruisers to single-pilot fighters from the Saurian Republic. Through the nebula's colorful gas clouds, Jake could see the geometric shapes of the Devourer fleet approaching. They moved with perfect precision, like a massive school of mechanical fish. Each ship was the size of a city, and there were tens of thousands of them. Any word from the volunteers? Jake asked. Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her science station. 47 human volunteers are ready in their modified shuttles. We've equipped each one with concentrated pheromone dispensers and emergency escape pods. Jake nodded. The plan was simple but dangerous. The human volunteers would fly directly at the Devourer command ships, releasing massive clouds of synthesized Guardian scent, while experiencing real emotions of courage and sacrifice. This should disrupt the enemy's biological communication network long enough for the Alliance fleet to attack. Captain, said Security Chief Kate Miller, I still think I should be leading one of those shuttles. Negative. Kate, I need you here commanding our defenses. On the main screen, Empress Valeth appeared from her flagship. She looked different than when Jake had first met her. The fear and sadness in her eyes had been replaced by determination and hope. Captain Morrison, the Alliance fleet is ready. But I must ask one more time. Are you certain about this plan? As certain as we can be, Your Majesty. Dr. Grant's analysis shows that Guardian-type pheromones should interfere with devourer coordination. But we won't know for sure until we try. And if it doesn't work? Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They all knew the risks, but none of them showed fear. Then we'll improvise. That's what humans do best. Engineer Pete Collins called out from his station. Captain, the devourers have stopped advancing. They're forming up into some kind of attack formation. On the tactical display, the enemy fleet was arranging itself into perfect geometric patterns, triangle formations within triangle formations, all pointing toward the Alliance fleet. They know we're here, Jake said. Amy, open a channel to all ships. Channel open, sir. Jake took a deep breath. He was about to give orders that would send dozens of volunteers into almost certain death. This is Captain Morrison to all Alliance vessels. In 5 minutes, we begin the most important battle in galactic history. Today, we fight not just for our own worlds, but for the right of all life to exist free from mechanical tyranny. He paused, looking at the diverse collection of ships on his screen. 1,000 years ago, the Guardians gave their lives to save the Zephyrian people. Today, we honor their sacrifice by standing together, former enemies united by something stronger than hate. We stand for hope. Jake nodded to Amy, who opened the specific channel to the volunteer shuttles. Volunteer squadrons, this is your final check. You understand the mission and the risks. Are you ready? 47 voices answered, some scared but all determined. Danny Wright's voice came through clearly. Ready as we'll ever be, Captain. Time to show these machines what humans are made of. Good luck, all of you. Try to make it back alive. We're going to need heroes for the victory celebration. The volunteer shuttles launched from various ships across the Alliance fleet. Jake watched the small craft accelerate toward the massive devourer formations, looking like insects flying toward giants. Dr. Grant, are you monitoring their pheromone output? Yes, Captain. The readings are incredible. The volunteers are producing Guardian scent at levels I've never seen. The combination of artificial synthesis and genuine emotional response is perfect. On the tactical display, the shuttle formations approached the Devourer command vessels. Jake held his breath as the tiny human ships disappeared into clouds of enemy fighters. They're releasing the pheromone clouds now, Dr. Grant reported. I'm detecting massive chemical dispersal across multiple target zones. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Devourer fleet continued its perfect formations, moving toward the Alliance with mechanical precision. Then something changed. Captain, Ben Taylor called out excitedly. I'm seeing disruption in their movement patterns. Some of the ships are breaking formation. Jake watched as the perfect geometric shapes of the Devourer fleet began to fall apart. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination now seemed confused, bumping into each other or moving in random directions. It's working, Dr. Grant shouted. The biological network is fragmenting. Individual ships are losing contact with the hive mind. All ships, Jake commanded, begin the attack. Target the confused vessels first. The Alliance fleet surged forward. Zephyrian crystal ships fired beams of pure energy, while Saurian fighters swarmed around Devourer vessels like angry insects. Ships from dozens of different worlds unleashed everything they had. But the Devourers were not helpless. Even confused, they began to fight back with weapons that turned space itself into fire. Alliance ships exploded in brilliant flashes as they pressed their attack. Damage reports coming in, Kate Miller said grimly. We're losing ships fast. The Devourers are adapting to our attack patterns. What about the volunteers? Jake asked. 31 shuttles have successfully deployed their pheromone clouds and escaped, Amy reported. But we've lost 16 craft, including, she paused, checking her readouts, including Danny Wright. His shuttle was destroyed during the attack run on Command Vessel 7. Jake felt a stab of grief, but there was no time to mourn. Did his mission succeed? Yes, sir. Command Vessel 7 is showing major disruption. Several Devourer squadrons in that sector have gone completely dark. The battle raged for hours. Alliance ships fought with desperate courage while the Devourers slowly adapted to their tactics. Just when Jake thought they might actually win, new contacts appeared on the sensors. Captain, Pete Collins said with horror in his voice, more Devourer ships are jumping in. Thousands of them. Jake's heart sank. They had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, but there were just too many enemies. Then Dr. Grant made a discovery that changed everything. Captain, I'm detecting something impossible. The new Devourer ships. They're not reinforcements. They're fighting the original fleet. What? The pheromone disruption didn't just break their coordination. It triggered some kind of civil war. Different Devourer factions are attacking each other. On the main screen, Jake watched in amazement as mechanical giants turned their weapons on their own kind. The perfect unity of the Devourer hive mind had shattered, creating chaos within their ranks. All Alliance ships, Jake commanded, focus your attacks on damaged Devourer vessels. Let them fight each other while we pick off the survivors. The tide of battle turned. Confused and fighting among themselves, the Devourer fleet began to fall apart. Alliance ships pressed their advantage, destroying enemy vessels that were too busy fighting each other to defend themselves properly. But victory came at a terrible cost. When the last Devourer ship finally went dark, less than half the Alliance fleet remained. Good people from dozens of worlds had given their lives for this moment. Jake found himself back in the memorial hall aboard Empress Valeth's flagship, but now it looked different. New holographic displays showed the faces of all who had died in the battle. Humans, Zephyrians, Saurians, and many others. They will be remembered alongside the Guardians, the Empress said, her crystal tears flowing freely. Heroes who gave everything so that others might live free. Danny Wright was a good pilot, Jake said quietly, looking at his friend's image among the fallen. He would have been proud to be remembered with the Guardians. The Empress turned to face him. Captain Morrison, what your people did today. The pheromone weapon, the willing sacrifice, the courage in the face of impossible odds. You truly are what the Guardians were. Jake shook his head. We're what they helped make possible. The Guardians saved your people so they could become better. You saved our people by showing us who we could be. What happens now? The Empress asked. Jake looked around the memorial hall, thinking about all the species that had fought together, all the former enemies who had become allies. Now we build something better, a galaxy where courage and sacrifice are honored, where species help each other instead of conquering each other. And if new threats arise? Jake smiled, thinking about the diverse fleet that had stood together against the darkness. Then we'll face them together. Guardians, Zephyrians, humans, and everyone else who believes that life is worth protecting. Outside the ship's windows, the Kepler Nebula glowed with the light of 1,000,000 stars. Somewhere among them, new civilizations were growing. New species were learning to reach for the sky, and watching over them all were the spirits of the Guardians, both the ancient ones who had died 1,000 years ago, and the new ones who had proven that courage and sacrifice were not bound by species or time. The galaxy was safe, not because one race had conquered all others, but because many races had learned to stand together, and in that unity, the true legacy of the Guardians.